10 years. When it came to toys and games, I've had something of a fascination with the old. Whether it be something from my childhood or from even further back. Anytime I find myself at a flea market or one of the local antique shops, I more often than not go straight for the toys and games, just to see if I could find any hidden gems, so to speak. And while on occasion I would pick something up if it was something I was really interested in, up till now I would usually just leave anything I found behind, mainly because I don't know many people around here that would want to play them with me. But then I started Gemini Does Games, and shortly afterward, I thought it might be a good idea to take a closer look at some older tabletop games, hence the creation of this series. On each show, we'll take a look at how a game is played, how it looks, think about why it may have succeeded or failed, and ultimately determine whether it should be brought back into the limelight or if it should just stay buried into the past. And, heck, if I like a game enough, and provided it wouldn't be too difficult to pull off, might even attempt a restoration job. One game that definitely won't need restoring is that. Probe. Now, don't let the name fool you. This is not a game about aliens or awkward medical procedures of any kind. Rather, this is Parker Brothers' Game of Words, first introduced in 1964. That's the year my particular copy hails from, being one of the earlier versions, though not quite the first version. I picked it up at an antique store for $5, and for a 50-plus-year-old game, it's in amazingly good condition. All the pieces are there, and the box isn't too torn up at all. The box art for this particular edition depicts gameplay in medias res, with 3 typical 60s people apparently playing the game against a gorilla. I mean, seriously, look at this guy's hands. They make a hobbit's foot hair look like stubble. Moving past the hairy hands and taking a look inside the box, we find a very neatly arranged set of contents. There are 4 card holders. Each one holds 96 cards consisting of certain amounts of each letter of the alphabet, along with 5 cards referred to as blanks, or dots depending on which version you have. There's another holder for a deck known as the activity deck, the inclusion of which in gameplay is optional. You have an instruction sheet, as well as a scorecard, which has already seen some use, both recently by me and who knows how long ago by not me. And finally, this being one of the earlier versions, you have 4 fold-out 12-space racks, which you use to spell out your word. Some later versions of the game did away with these in the letter cards in favor of strips of paper to write your word on, and a device with little doors to cover each letter. Naturally, with such a minimal amount of pieces, setup for a game is very simple. Each player takes a rack, unfolds it, and places it in front of him such that the numbers 1 to 12 in the corner of each space go from the player's right to left. Then, you just choose a letter deck, and if you have the activity deck in play, you put that in the middle of the table, and you're ready. Now, while the instructions detail special rules for games involving only 2 players, for this show we're going to be dealing with a typical game involving 3 to 4 players. Before starting a game, each player secretly chooses a word and takes the letters needed to spell that word from their deck. Then, starting with the first letter in the number 1 space, they place each letter of the word in each space of the rack. The goal of the game is to try to guess your opponent's words, while hopefully having yours go unguessed in the process. Now, you'll remember I mentioned the letter decks also contained blanks. Well, say one of my opponents here has thought of a 7-letter word, but who wants to try to fool us into thinking maybe he has a 10-letter word? He can take some of the blanks from his deck and put them in front of his word, or behind, or both. Blanks cannot, however, be used as substitutes for letters a la Scrabble, nor can they be used to split letters up to make more than one word. Once you've elected a scorekeeper and decided who goes first, the game begins. At the start of your turn, if you have the activity deck in play, you begin by taking the top card from the deck and reading the instructions on it. These could be anything from adding or subtracting from your score to revealing a player's letter card, while some simply instruct you to play your turn as normal. You then begin asking, or shall we say, probing? Other players about their word by asking if their word contains either a particular letter or a blank. For instance, do you have an S in that word? If the player you question has the letter you ask for, they turn it over, and you score the points in that letter's section of the rack. For instance, there was a 10 under that S, which means I score 10 points. Now, if a player you question has more than one of a particular letter you ask for, that player can choose which letter he reveals. The only way you can reveal the duplicates, if there are any, is by asking for that same letter again. Once you've guessed a player's letter, your turn continues, and you can either keep probing the same player or switch to another player. If you reveal a player's word entirely, then you get a bonus of 50 points. And you keep playing your turn until you get a no answer, at which point the next player takes his turn. Now it should be noted at this point that even if your word has been guessed, you can still have a turn and try to gain points by questioning other players about their word. Now, the next player begins his turn. Oh, hang on. I know his word. As rude as that may appear to be, that's actually another facet of the gameplay. It's referred to as the interruptive rule. At any point in the game, no matter whose turn is in progress, you can try to guess an opponent's word, provided that opponent has at least 5 cards still unexposed. You make your guess by spelling out the opponent's entire word from left to right, including blanks. If you're right, you score the points behind the unexposed cards, as well as a bonus of 100 points. Okay. D-E-C-O-M-P-O-S-E-D. 違う! While an incorrect guess incurs a 50-point penalty. Play continues until only one player remains with unexposed cards, at which point the final round begins. Now, in the final round, each of the other 2 players have 2 turns taken as normal to probe the player with unexposed cards. Now, if no one has guessed that player's word by the last guesser's final turn, then the last player standing earns the points behind the unexposed cards, as well as a bonus of 50 points for keeping his word hidden, or 100 points if there are 5 or more cards still unexposed. Probe is a very simple game, easy to pick up, easy to master, and I have no doubt that was a contributing factor to its longevity. The game was in production until 1982. But there's also a danger of being too simple. And in Probe's case, well, put it this way. Without the activity deck in play, you're left with what is essentially the love child of Hangman and Go Fish. Even including the activity deck doesn't really do that much to vary the gameplay, especially in the later part of the game where there are some cards whose instructions you just won't be able to follow, in which case the game manual simply instructs you to play your turn as normal, which kind of makes the activity deck seem a little pointless.
The instructions do include a neat modification to the game known as the progressive game, wherein 12 people divide into 3 groups of 4 and play 3 separate games, with the winners from each game playing a final game.
While it sounds fun, the downside is it requires you to have 11 readily available friends, and 2 of them have to bring another copy of the game. Obviously not that big of a problem in the game's heyday, but in this day and age, it's a bit of a different story.
I paid $5 at a local antique shop for this copy, while the average price for it on eBay is just a bit higher at around $13.
But if your local antique store doesn't have a copy of the game, or if you just don't like eBay for whatever reason, you're stuck with Amazon, where the average price there is, well, a bit higher. Personally, I think the $5 to $15 range is about right for what you get in terms of enjoyment and gameplay. It's not appointment playing, so to speak, but it is still a fun little game that will fit in nicely in a party game lineup, or heck, just something to warm you up before a longer, more involved game. If Parker Brothers, or whoever owns them now, put their mind to it, I could see this coming back today, but maybe call it something other than Probe. There are one too many other connotations that could go with that. Well, I hope you enjoyed taking this trip back through time with me as we look at a tabletop game from yesteryear. I look forward to doing it again, and I hope you'll join me. Jikai mare. Sayonara.